When looking at human history, a dark and shameful legacy is revealed. Slavery for thousands of years chained humans to each other to maintain the order of different civilizations. It saw the body as property and the soul as possession. In ancient Mesopotamia, prisoners of war were made slaves. In the shadow of the pyramids in ancient Egypt, thousands of people were forced to work under harsh conditions. While the blood of gladiators filled the arenas in the Roman Empire, people chained in the fields carried the empire's wealth on their backs. The same story was written everywhere, from the villages of Africa to the continents of Europe and America. The story of millions of people whose freedom was taken away, identity ignored, and voice silenced. But this story was not only one of captivity, but also of resistance. Even if a person was chained, they did not lose hope. There were countless slaves who tried to escape, rose up for freedom, and struggled to make their voices heard. Each one proved that human dignity could not be imprisoned by any chain. From the 15th century onwards, a new dark era began on the Atlantic coasts. European powers extended deep into Africa, forcibly loading millions of people onto ships. This journey, known as the Middle Passage, became one of the greatest mass tragedies in history. Men, women, and children in chains were left without air on cramped decks. Thousands lost their lives during the journey. Those who survived were recorded as numbers instead of people when they arrived on the American continent. They were made to work on plantations, in mines, and in fields. While products like cotton, sugar, and coffee increased Europe's wealth, behind that wealth were human blood and tears. Slavery was not only an economic system, but also a moral collapse. The profit obtained from the human body formed the first steps of modern capitalism. But like every oppressive system, this also gave rise to resistance. In Haiti, slaves revolted and carried out the first successful independence movement in history. From Jamaica to Brazil, the slave rebellions showed that freedom would not be easily surrendered. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the conscience of humanity began to rise with a louder voice. Thinkers, writers, and politicians in Europe and America emerged saying, "Slavery is a crime." When England banned slavery in 1833, it was a turning point not only for its own empire, but for the entire world. In America, this struggle extended to a bloody civil war, and in 1865, slavery was officially abolished with the 13th Constitutional Amendment. However, freedom was only on paper. In practice, equality was not achieved for many years. Many people who were freed were chained again due to legal loopholes. With the system called convict leasing, blacks who were imprisoned for minor offenses were sent back to the fields. Slavery had been abolished, but the shadow of slavery still loomed over society. Inequality in education, limited economic opportunities, and institutionalized racism became the heavy legacy left behind by slavery. Yet the stories told in the words of former slaves themselves left unforgettable marks. As part of the Federal Writers Project conducted in the United States in the 1930s, hundreds of former slaves were interviewed. Their painful memories, tears, hopes, and prayers still resonate today. These narratives remind us once again that chains bound their bodies but never enslaved their spirits. The traces of slavery were seen not only in America, but in every corner of the world. In Brazil, slavery was abolished in 1888. In Ottoman territories, it officially ended in the late 19th century. However, no prohibition was sufficient on its own. The real struggle continued in the consciousness and conscience of societies. Declarations of human rights, universal law, and international agreements define slavery not only as a practice of the past, but as a crime against all humanity. Even though slavery has been officially abolished today, human trafficking and forced labor still appear in different parts of the world. This reality reminds us that slavery is not only a shame of the past, but also a responsibility of the present. Humanity knows that chains are not only made of iron, but can also consist of poverty, ignorance, and injustice. And that is why the end of slavery should not just be a closed chapter in history, but a lesson illuminating the future. One of humanity's darkest legacies ended with the struggle for freedom. The moment the chains were broken was the rebirth of human dignity. This documentary reminds us that the struggle for freedom, equality, and human dignity never ends. Knowing the past is the only way to build a more just and freer future. Today, hands freed from chains raised to the sky rise as a sign of hope, not only against slavery, but against all forms of oppression and injustice. History bears the traces of both oppression and resistance, and we choose the direction of the future from those traces. The dark legacy of slavery has ended, but the lessons it taught will live on in the conscience of humanity forever.